Thank you. I think we had everyone here, and as you can see, the broad constellation of people that were here, and I want to appreciate that. I'm here with my co-chairs, Mayor Jon Mitchell from New Bedford.
Great to be here.
And Representative Chris Markey, who lives in Dartmouth. I just want to take a second and, as an overview, I think to everyone here, state, which is pretty much the obvious. We have still, unfortunately in this country, a major issue with domestic violence, sexual assault, personal partner relationships that have result in stalking and other activities. In fact, if you look around, even worldwide, at this issue, you just conclude what we all know too. It's hugely disproportionately a crime where women are the victims. Of the 4.5 victims of human trafficking around the world, 98% are women and girls. If you look at this country, 1 in 4 women, thank you for joining us, 1 in 4 women in this country nationally have been a victim of severe physical assault. If you look at Massachusetts, over 31% of women and young girls are victims of rape or victims of physical abuse or stalking from intimate partners. So if you look at these numbers, they're staggering. And we're here to say, although there's such a disproportionate number of women involved, that it's really not just a woman's issue. It's also a man's issue. And somewhere around 1991, I believe it was, in Canada, a group of men came together to speak out and join together and to stand up and make strong statements and pledges that they would not tolerate domestic violence and physical assault and sexual assault, and they would do something about it. They would speak up, they would pledge not to condone it, and they taught this generationally too. As a district attorney, I had different opportunities to lead my county and get involved in the statewide efforts to go to the schools and to have young men do that and sign a pledge. In Congress, just when we were in session last week, I introduced the white ribbon pledge there, and we had, if you saw them on TV, many congressmen wearing the white ribbons as they were speaking. But we have to remain vigilant. This is a crime that just transcends all socioeconomic levels. It's a unique crime in that respect, and one that we can't let continue in the shadows, because one of the things, especially with intimate partners, is to isolate the victims and to move them away from their friends and their families so that they don't have that kind of support. We're here in the white ribbon to say, as men, we're not going to let those kind of barriers break down our efforts to do this. So with that, I want to turn it over to the mayor and thank him for co-chairing this.
Oops. Well, I want to thank you, Congressman Keating, for continuing to champion this cause. This is something that the Congressman championed while he was both in the State House as well as when he was a district attorney. And you know, no one would begrudge him if he figured that, well, this is an issue that is left to district attorneys to deal with, because traditionally that's where government dealt with domestic violence. But I think you're championing the cause in the halls of Congress is appropriate, and it really reflects a recognition that this is a national problem. When I say this, it's domestic violence and defined most broadly. Domestic partners, husband and wife, kids, human trafficking, these are all issues that are bundled up under the rubric of domestic violence. And I think you hit the nail right on the head. It is a matter for men to take up, frankly. I think most men these days would agree with the idea that it's not appropriate to rough up your girlfriend because you're angry at her or you need to put her in her place. At least everybody that I consider to be a friend would agree with that idea. But the reality is there's still a lot of guys who cross the line. And I think it's incumbent upon men generally to not just behave themselves, but to speak out, to call out other men who don't see it the same way, who still think that it's okay to lay a hand on a woman or as the case may be, a domestic partner. So I think that's probably the most important takeaway, that when we deal with larger social issues, it's not just a matter of government stepping in and saying thou shalt not do that, nor is it simply a matter of doing our own narrow part to constrain ourselves. It really is incumbent upon all of us to take a broader responsibility and really extend ourselves to the behavior of other people. And I think that's the White Ribbon Campaign champions that approach. This is something that we deal with all the time in the city of New Bedford. The chief prevention will tell you that he's dealing with domestic cases all the time. We've had this year, our only cases of homicide this year in the city of New Bedford aren't from gunshot; they're domestic violence cases, and so it's a constant battle here, and Pam McLeod at the Women's Center sees it all the time, and her work, unfortunately, her business is still robust, and that's just a reflection of the fact that we've got a long way to go as a society and as a city before we get our arms around it. So, and it'll take, I think, frankly, a combined federal, state, and local commitment. That's why you see the three of us up here at each level of government needs to step up. So, this campaign, this event, is a reminder of our responsibilities and a renewal of our commitment to improving the lives of especially women in our society and ultimately families in our society. So I thank all of you for doing all that you do in support of those efforts, and thank you again, Congressman Keating, Representative Markey, for stepping up.
I'd like to turn it over to Representative Chris Markey, if we can do this. Let me see if I can do this deftly.
Sounds good. Thank you all for coming, number one. I think just a few things to take away from just briefly in regard to the three of us up here. We are all former prosecutors, and we understand the difficulties of these particular cases, and the sense that a very private situation becomes public. And that is one of the things that witnesses and victims fear in a great deal, is having to deal with what has happened behind their closed doors. And it was very difficult as a local state prosecutor to have those witnesses come forward to talk to them and build a relationship with them. The three of us now have moved on into more of a policy type positions with our government, and I think the fact that the three of us are up here gives some recognition of the difficulties that women have dealing with domestic violence, and hopefully that the policies that we make can assist those women as well. But what I think one of the things that I've learned through the process of working with victims of domestic violence is it's a gradual conduct of an individual, and it's a gradual conduct that many of us turn to ignore. And being an Irish Catholic, I can say this: we try to ignore everything until it becomes a problem. To some degree, that's what happens with domestic violence. It gets to the point where getting yelled at is acceptable. Coming home drunk and being told, hey, you have kids to worry about, and getting in an argument about that's become acceptable. The fact that you come home and there's financial problems and you have an argument and then you push your wife away and that becomes acceptable. And then from the pushing to a closed fist, then to keeping someone in the bedroom and locked up and closing them in. That's what happens in all of these cases, probably well before they even get to court. So a woman who has finally to the point of calling the police has suffered through a lot more than just a push or a shove or a punch. Because we, men, women, children, want to keep it private for the most part. We don't want to interfere with their lives. I think this program and this pledge makes us understand that this is not what's acceptable. That yelling when you come home isn't acceptable, and we need to stand up for it. That argument when you come home drunk, that's not acceptable. That shove is clearly not acceptable. That closed fist punch to the face is not acceptable. And I hope that through these programs, and again, we've done as policy reason, for policy reasons in education, we try to get kids young. We talk about early education all the time. Children, teenagers need to understand that their relationships are much like adults. You need to take care of the ones you love, treat the ones you love with respect and honor. And I hope one of the things that we can take from this is getting into the schools so that young boys have a true appreciation for what love is, what respect is, and what honor is. And I hope that this white ribbon panel can begin to get the policymakers, the educators, the people like Pam who have dedicated their lives to this, and to make sure that this doesn't happen, that we don't have 2 homicides by the end of March next year in New Bedford from domestic violence. That's what I hope for. I hope we can do that throughout the community, and I hope that you can all respect what we're trying to do and assist us in doing that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we recite the pledge at the end, a couple of other observations. Number one, when Representative Markey was talking about what we saw as prosecutors and what we did, there were more victims, many more victims than just the victim themselves. In family situation, the studies have been clear for decades now. I remember Boston Medical Center was one of the lead areas for children that witness violence. So the other children, if it's a household that witness this, are victims too. And they suffer brain trauma and have very real effects from this. And it's also important to note that in the Violence Against Women Act that just was passed federally, after a long battle to get it going, it's now clarified into this area of breaking through barriers and isolation, so that it's clear now that those efforts to try and prevent and make safe living space, for nothing is clarified than that, for women in particular, should include Native Americans and their tribal law. And it should include people of the same sex. It shouldn't be isolated as a result of someone's sexual orientation. And also clarifying that it shouldn't be a case where it's not enforced against illegal immigrants. Victims are victims of crime. And we made that clear with this last passage as well. So that was a long time coming, and that's the case. So if we could all join together with my chairs and recite a pledge. Stand up. I'll get my glasses so I get this right, even though I think it's, I know in my heart. Okay. We'll do this, and then I'd like to hear from Jane Doe and Pam McLeod after we do this. She wanted to make sure we did this before. So there's 3 basic pledges, all important, and if we can recite them together or join with us. The first one is never commit violence against women. Never commit violence against women. Never
remain silent about violence against women.
Never remain.
Jumped ahead.
That's good. That's the third one. That's good. And never condone violence against women.
Never condone violence against women.
Okay, go ahead. Now is your chance. Never to remain silent about violence against women. Thank
There we
you.
go.
So, thank you. And now that we've done that, Pam can come up and would like to hear from a great partner and a group that's done enormous good in this regard.
Thank you so much, Congressman Keating. Thank you so much for bringing this campaign and bringing this program here. We love it when partners come forward and do prevention efforts. In particular, this is something that should be led by men in the community, and we love to see that. Also because our entire prevention and education and outreach department is sitting right there. That is her, that is our whole department. So it is hard for us to actually serve, what she does is serve all the schools in the 12 towns and 2 cities that we serve of New Bedford and Fall River, plus go out to service providers. And so it's really wonderful for her and for us all to have this coming forward, this program coming from the community. As Congressman Keating said, I am from the Women's Center. Sometimes I enter someplace and they say, oh, the Women's Center's here. I'm not the entire Women's Center. We actually have a number of women that work for us, but I understand that I do represent the Women's Center after 11 years of being in the community, and I'm proud to have been here that long. The community itself has had the Women's Center services for 40 years this year. We are going into our 40th year. I can't say we can celebrate 40 years because this is not something to celebrate, but perhaps it is something to celebrate the fact that we are here with services for victims, and they are needed, and we are still here to provide them. In spite of making it through many budget cuts and having VAWA on the edge, and thank you so much for VAWA, we have made it through. And as our media materials would tell you, we provide domestic violence services, rape crisis services, and also a child trauma program to the 12 towns and 2 cities of the South Coast. And we say so often that we provide services to primary and secondary victims of violence that we sometimes forget how important those services are. The counseling, for example, should really be called healing. We provide a path to healing. And if you've seen a victim of violence, even after many years, talk on television about a sexual assault when they were a child, for instance, or having lived in a domestic violence household, you know that that pain is as fresh today as it was then because, as Congressman Keating said, it happened in silence and in the shadows. And so we help them to heal from something that was so cloaked in silence. And advocacy also is a strong word. Counseling and advocacy. Advocacy means that we're there at 3 o'clock in the morning at the hospital when there's a victim of a sexual assault or domestic violence. That we're there to hold their hands, to help them, to explain what will happen, to walk them through even the court process. We have advocates at the court every single day to meet victims there, to help them get restraining orders. So that advocacy word is also very powerful because we are there for the victim. We are sometimes the only person there just for the victims. We don't take part in the investigation. We're not part of the investigation. We hope that the perpetrator is brought to justice, but we can't be part of that because we are there just for the victim, and everything they tell us they need to know is in confidence. And Congressman Keating gave some numbers, but I will tell you that there's not one data set that really provides a picture of Massachusetts domestic violence because, as he also mentioned, and I think as Mayor Mitchell mentioned, LGBT survivors often don't come through our services. They're afraid to come forward as LGBT individuals, never mind then discussing a domestic violence incident in their lives. So we don't see as many from that community as we would like. Immigrant victims often are afraid to come forward. So it's not, we really talk about services provided in some of the numbers, and these numbers are really soft numbers actually, but I can tell you that the National Intimate Partner in Sexual Violence Survey data from Massachusetts says that it was very similar to national figures. Nearly 1 in 2 women and 1 in 4 men in Massachusetts have ever experienced sexual violence victimization. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men in Massachusetts have experienced rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner, and more than 1 in 7 women have experienced rape. 2,337 unduplicated incidents of sexual assaults were reported to rape crisis centers, of which we are one, between July 1, 2011 and 2012. That's 1 year, 2,337 sexual assaults. 11% of high school students and 6% of middle school students report being physically hurt by a date. And between 2003 and December 31st, 2012, Jane Doe identified 231 victims of domestic violence-related homicides, and an additional 121 domestic violence homicide perpetrator deaths. So this is very prevalent in our community. You look at those numbers and they're actually staggering. The Women's Center is a member of Jane Doe Incorporated, and Jane Doe also has a white ribbon campaign as part of Jane Doe. And it's very important that we all get involved in ending this violence. The World Health Organization identified violence as a public health problem and called it the most preventable and predictable form of death. Preventable and predictable if we all get involved. Like other social problems, an end to domestic violence requires change on both the individual and societal level, and men must be involved in ending the violence. They're the other half of the population, and very often, unfortunately, the perpetrators of the violence. Craig Nobberbaum, who would have loved to have been here, he's the head of the Jane Doe campaign, he noted that reaching the 5-year mark of the White Ribbon Campaign prompted the organizers to step back and ask basically the Dr. Phil question, how are we doing? How is this working for us? And they have seen difference in the policy arena, and the impact in public dialogue on the issue has improved, and the involvement in more men in local and statewide efforts has definitely improved. It has definitely gone up. But they asked themselves, what about the impact of the campaign on men? So in the fall of 2012, Jane Doe convened a meeting of a diverse group of men who had all been involved as organizers and asked them about their own thoughts, perspectives, and commitments to the issue. And one of those men, Suffolk County District Attorney Daniel Conley, and as someone mentioned very often, it does reside with district attorneys, he became the co-chair of this year's White Ribbon Campaign, and he weighed in on positive masculinity, role models, and how communities can help stop violence. He noted that White Ribbon Day is about creating a community standard among boys and men that rejects violence, that starts with positive masculinity. It's about positive role models, people a young man would want to be compared to, men who understand the importance of respect in personal relationships. Every community sees sexual and domestic violence in every form, from every kind of relationship. But the statistics are unequivocal. The majority of these cases involve men using violence against women. That is just a fact. We need to do two things about this sort of violence. I was glad to see that our former prosecutors here and our present prosecutors are also very good on this issue, because on one side we need to hold offenders accountable and we need to provide support to victims, which is what we do. That's very important. But most importantly, long before the behavior begins, before the cycle of violence starts, we need to teach boys and young men not to engage in that behavior. We need to say to boys, you can be a man, you can be strong, you can be respected without ever considering violence in a relationship. You can make the White Ribbon Pledge, as you all did today. Thank you very much for that. And you can keep it, and it will make you stronger, not weaker. It will mean something to you. It will mean something to friends and colleagues, and most importantly, will mean a lot to the women in your lives. The White Ribbon Day principles of respect and nonviolence are ones that everyone can embrace. White Ribbon Day demonstrates to boys, men, and everyone in the community a truly positive vision of masculinity. You can be strong and still show love. You can be independent and still show compassion. You don't have to limit yourself. Some White Ribbon Day facts that Craig wanted me to share with you so you know that this is growing. The number of ambassadors statewide is now 525. Number of affiliate organizations is 75. Number of ribbons distributed this year, and we all got them tonight. And we, as women, we can wear them to show that we support men in this campaign. There were 10,000 ribbons distributed this year in the White Ribbon Campaign, and there's been about 50 local events. So we can do this if everyone is involved and puts their commitment into it, which I know that Congressman has done. And I want to also acknowledge and thank Mayor Mitchell and Chief Preventure for their support of the Women's Center and our services and their support towards ending domestic and sexual violence, which we know is strong, and we thank you for that every day. We have reason to thank you. And especially want to thank Congressman Keating for not only being here in our community tonight with this program, but for bringing White Ribbon Day to the halls of Congress. That was incredible for us to see on C-SPAN. It was wonderful. And a final note and reminder, our services are there. They are free. They are confidential. And our 24-hour hotline is 508-999-6636. And there is always help at the end of that line. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. We saved the best for last, and thank you very much.
I do a bit of housekeeping real quick.
Yes, Jim?
Just before we wrap up here, and this is important, we have our sign-in sheets. The reason why this is important is because this is just the beginning of the White Ribbon campaign here on the South Coast, we hope. And what we want to do is, go to the next step, and we want to do that with you. So whether that's going into a school to bring the white ribbon, if that's a municipality, a fire station, a police station, wherever it may be, we want to coordinate that event with you and make sure it's the best event possible. I know, the history we had over at the Norfolk DA's office was we would have some assemblies. In some schools, we'd have white ribbon groups where you have young men take the lead. And so we hope to continue that. Inez Drolet, who's in the back of the room, and is a district office manager here in New Bedford. She and Hugh Dunn, who just left a minute ago because they had a law school class, will be leading the effort from our end. And I also, Rich Drolet just came into the room, and he didn't have a chance to introduce himself, and he's also a part of the committee, so I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce him. So I'll get some more pens. Hugh brought them down. I think he took off with them, so we'll get some more. So if you got a chance, sign in, please. Thank you.
And thank you very much. I think looking around the room and seeing the many groups that are here and how they can intervene is so important. We have civic leaders, we have letter carriers, we have firefighters and police who are first responders and often come into a setting right off the bat. We have the Women's Center as well as organized labor from so many different facets that are here. And we have the DA's office, and we have all the people that are directly, as Chris Markey had said, seeing this firsthand and working very hard. And thank you for all of your efforts. And remember, as we reach out this year as well, if it's a case of a Native American, if it's a case of LGBT person or undocumented person, this is a new area where we can get the message out that the law to prevent and help them now explicitly covers that as well. So thank you all for being here. You've made it a success, and together we'll save lives. Thank you.
When you earn your GED diploma, the barriers in your life fall. Take the first step and get free GED information in your area at 1-877-38-YOUR-GED or yourged.org. Earn your GED diploma and begin your brighter future.